Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first, and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us every week when we go live, typically on Thursdays. But, you know, we're going Wednesday this week because, Jeff, Thursday's a banger this week.
I thought you're going to say it was like something specific to me. Like, we're going on Wednesday because of Jeff.
Yeah, because
Explain.
Jeff created Thanksgiving, and as a result, we all must take off.
Jeff has
welcome.
plans.
Yeah.
Rude. Yeah.
Jeff is actually going to be revealed as a timeless robot who was a pilgrim.
Was a pilgrim.
It all makes
Wow.
sense. It all makes sense. You were at that first supper. Anna, plans?
Follow that up.
Plans for the Thanksgiving holiday?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday because there's nothing that I have to do.
As soon as we talked about that, we talked about how neither of us had to do anything at Thanksgiving. I got a text that was just like, actually
don't come.
if you could, you know what? We're still going to have it. You are uninvited though. No, it's, I got instructions to make a green bean casserole, which is great. I love making it. And I plan on making like more.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was
Probably
just like,
the least complicated
That's not a bad one.
Thanksgiving dish to have to put together.
the only thing that's complicated is that I have none of the ingredients. And so I like have to go, I have to go to like a grocery store the day before Thanksgiving, and it's lawless in there.
You don't have any
finding
of those French fried onions left?
What's that?
You don't have any of those French fried onions left from your stockpile?
I needed a snack last night. It was just
Finding those 3 ingredients may be tough.
Yeah, you know, I'll actually have to find like some sort of garden and
I do have extras. I did
Okay.
stock up a little bit.
okay.
So
Look forward to that text.
Jeff's the Thanksgiving prepper.
I am cooking up a storm tomorrow.
If
So,
that was if you were a Thanksgiving prepper and that was your basement, like no judgment whatsoever. Just like this entire wall is just gravy. It's fantastic. Like I prepped for the apocalypse and I prepped to not live long after it. All right. Well, before we get into our first story and I adjust my computer screen for like the 30th time in a short 4-minute window so far, we have a word from our sponsor. One of the long-lasting impacts of COVID-19 and the global pandemic it created has been the priority now being placed on long-term enterprise-wide planning. So join myself and Jeff as we discuss Oracle NetSuite's latest white paper, the ultimate guide to scenario planning, to hear about new strategies and steps that you can use to de-risk your organization. They're short, they're sweet, they're easy to download. Listen to it in the car on the ride home. Let us know what you think. Our first story this week. I can feel like we're all a little bit more upbeat because it's like, as soon as this is over, like the lights are off, the doors slam, and everyone just pulls out of the blasts out of the parking lot. Okay. Manufacturer sticks with 4-day work week. Based in Willoughby, Ohio, Advanced RV isn't your typical small manufacturer. The company makes luxury custom motorhomes out of Mercedes cargo vans. Last year, the company was one of some 200 companies that took part in a trial to see if 4-day work weeks could work. Now, according to a recent NPR interview, Advanced RV has no intention of ever going back to the old way of doing business. The company was one of a few manufacturers who participated in the project, which agreed to cut back to 32 hours per week while keeping the same pay. The hope is that companies could be just as productive in 4 days as they were if they were better rested and more efficient. It also could help with fatigue and burnout. The shop has some 50 employees who put extensive work into these RVs. Most of them take 2 years to complete the project. CEO Mike Neuendorfer admits that he could likely make more money working overtime. But the CEO told NPR he made the switch because, quote, it just seemed like the most significant thing I could do as a business owner and manager. Employees became mindful about their work, both individually and as a team. They played to each other's strengths. Some gave up responsibilities to coworkers who were simply better at doing the job. Anna, we've heard tales of the 4-day work week, but it's normally 4 10s. What were your thoughts on this story about a 4-day work week and a 32-hour work week?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this trial that they were a part of, there have been several of these. There was one in the UK that was widely reported on. I think generally the results of these trials have been quite positive. It's very hard, I think, from an outside perspective to see exactly how that works. But I think the more of these stories that we hear, that kind of quells some of that misunderstanding around why it works. Yeah. And especially, I think you hear a lot of pushback from businesses who are maybe afraid that this idea will dampen their profitability or their efficiency, and they don't want it to become an expectation in the industry that everyone has to do this. But I think look at it another way. And you brought up some really good points that the company had touted as to why this was working for them. I just read a report about how small businesses are increasingly able to find an edge when it comes to flexibility. Mm-hmm. Because you're seeing talent retention, I think, take a hit at some of these larger corporations that are going back to these corporate dictums around being on site. Mm-hmm. Everybody kind of doing the same thing and making sure you're putting in the same hours at an office. There's less of that flexibility that we swore during COVID-19 was permanent. As you can see in the media, that's like happening pretty widespread. But I do think there's a big competitive advantage for companies that can approach their labor force with some flexible working conditions. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to also consider that by and large, businesses are losing baby boomers and they're trading them in for like millennials and Gen Z. Yeah. So you have to think about it that way. You can't think about it like nobody expects this. Well, the people that are leaving don't, but the people that are coming in do, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's actually genius because when you look at manufacturing, it is not built for work from home. We've talked about this before. How do manufacturers create a working environment that is positive and sort of speaks to the need for flexibility or the need for modification that the new generation of workers want and need? This is, I think giving workers a permanent 3-day weekend like really does that. Oh yeah. And I found it really interesting when they talked about the new innovations that came out of this. It wasn't just because I think when you talk about like it prevents burnout, that's sort of like a nebulous concept. It's very hard to like pinpoint what that is actually doing for you.
Yeah, or what causes burnout, like specifically.
Exactly. And, obviously they're seeing great worker retention. So there's that. But it is hard. I think that's not as concrete as some of the examples that he laid out here, which are like, people came up with ways to get it done in 32 hours a week. And he said that he thinks potentially they might become more efficient in 32 hours than they were at 40. Mm-hmm. And if you think about all the people you've worked with over the course of your lifetime that are just sitting there running out the clock. Oh, yeah. Because they have to be there. Yeah. What is the value in that work?
Yeah, other than, because they're just there because they don't want to get points or whatever sort of demerit system is in place that would penalize them at their job.
Exactly. And so I think this is a great way for manufacturers to really take a look at this and think like, well, is this a way that I could position my business to be competitive for talent in a way that other people aren't doing? And if it's working for this company, maybe it works for them.
True. And understandably, this is a very unique manufacturer, Jeff, with a very unique product. But we talk all the time about how we, like most of us on this panel, believe that in one way or another, we will be able to innovate our way out of this skills shortage that we have in the manufacturing industry. But when we think about it, I don't think we necessarily think about innovative ways when it comes to day-to-day operations. We're thinking more like robotics and technology. Is this a potential innovation that could impact the workforce?
I think it will have an impact, and I don't think it matters if you want to embrace it or not, to be very honest. Because when I first looked at this, first of all, like you said, very unique work environment when you're looking at, first of all, 50 employees. So you're small. So it is possible. And we're going to talk a little bit about a company that doesn't have a strong internal culture in some ways. This one does, obviously. And there's a lot of these other manufacturing enterprises that do have a culture that's focused on, let's get this done for the company. We're all in this together. And that's been inspired usually by the founder or by the fact that it is a smaller company sort of going up against everybody else or doing something unique. So when I first started looking at a lot of these responses, there was that dynamic. There was also the fact that, well, of course employees are going to like it. Of course they're going to say, I feel better having a 3-day weekend as opposed to 2. You're going to feel more refreshed. You're not going to get sick as much because you're sleeping more. All of those types of things, that sort of was common sense.
Yeah.
But when you go to the next step, and the other thing I just want to say is this guy actually came out and said, hey, I know I could make more money if we worked more, but I'm not going to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's unique. I think that's great.
Yes, not everyone will say. Not everyone will say that. Yes,
there's not that many altruistic people. So the thing that caught my attention is doing a little bit more research. But the World Economic Forum came on and did that study in the UK, and there you had 90% of those individuals saying not the workers, but the actual employers, the company saying we're going to keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if they were going to do it because they can continue to hit the same financial benchmarks.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the case. And there starts to become this groundswell of data showing how a 32-hour work week impacts productivity without sacrificing the financial gains. We may not have a choice. Doesn't matter if you're in manufacturing or any place else. We kind of brushed it aside when the UAW put down a 32-hour work week as one of their bargaining points.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, right.
Yeah. Thought it was silly.
Think about that now.
Yeah.
In the future, if that comes up again, and whether it's Sean Fain or whoever else for the UAW goes in and says, we can demonstrate this is going to decrease safety incidents. You're going to have fewer people calling in sick. It's going to make healthcare costs lower, whatever the case may be. And the UAW would somehow get that pushed through. Where does it stop then? You will not have a choice. If you get somebody big really on board with this, and there's this groundswell of support for this dynamic, there may not be an option. This may become a new normal if we continue down this road. And that's going to be very interesting. Because at some point, you're always going to have those individuals watching the clock, biding their time and doing whatever. I don't think that matters if it's a 32-hour work week or a 52-hour work week. You're just going to have people who are like, I'm here for the check. When can I get out of here? Type of mentality. But that'll put more pressure than operationally too to still produce those same results. So it's going to be an interesting counterbalance to see how it plays out. But right now, there is a ton of momentum towards this 4-day, 32-hour work week. It's interesting.
The original 5-day work week only came out from an outdated need to have people working long hours in factories with minimum days off. And I have to imagine, I didn't live it, but I have to imagine that was incredibly disruptive. Saying like, what do you mean we're only going to have a 5-day work week instead of working every day? And the idea had a lot of skeptics, even internally at Advanced RV. They interviewed a number of people that said, okay, I went home, I had Mondays off, but I went home and I had my email open, or I kind of kept an eye on it just because, you do feel like things might fall down or fall through the cracks. But one thing that I liked is that it challenged the employees because they wanted the 32-hour work week to figure out how they could get it done and still put out. I mean, this is an incredibly high-priced, high-quality product. Like you can't cut corners on something like this.
So then the question is, okay, these guys bought in. Fantastic. And wherever it can work, you should definitely try to implement it. How does this translate to a place that has 500 employees?
Yeah.
Do they have the same esprit de corps? Do they have the same buy-in at the same level? Do you enforce that, or how do you create that?
Yeah. I think that it would be difficult, but I think it's like anything we talk about, right? When it comes from the top down, if you have buy-in at the top, and the workers truly believe like, oh man, if we can make this work, we will have a 3-day weekend. I do think that you can get in buy-in across.
Oh yeah. I mean, of all things to buy in on, people are going to be motivated to have an extra day off. I mean, I don't think that that's going to be like as challenging as you would think. I mean, I know 500 is different than 50 and you're going to have bad apples and all that stuff, but that is a huge, huge motivator.
But it also, when you're talking about bad apples, it also might expose them much faster than normally being able to kind of just fall into the background. Because when you're working 32s, I mean, there's no room for dead weight. and they might get exposed and you might become a better company as a result. Like, one other thing, like, we talk about innovating our way out of this skills gap. So just automation and modern manufacturing are things that are going to make things like a 32-hour work week possible. Industrial IoT, additive manufacturing, AI-powered technology. It's crazy, but I think like we're a lot closer to this than we think. And just in terms of making this possible. There have been some reports out there that kind of combats the 4-day work week. Like there's one in particular from Fox Business, which looked at American Plastic Toys, which tested out a 4-day work week, but they did 4 10s. I'm like, that's not the same thing. Yeah. They're just like, we found out that after 8 hours, people were less effective. Just like, well, yeah, so I just think that it's, when you look at a 4-day work week, you have to think of it as not 4 10s, but as 32-hour work week. But I mean, with this particular company, also American Plastic Toys, there are some companies that just have customers that require shipping availability, if not 5 days a week, 7 days a week. And so it is going to take some getting creative to make sure everything's covered.
The other part of that, though, is if you'd essentially have 2 shifts, right? Somebody's working Monday to Thursday and somebody's working Friday to Monday or whatever the case is.
I know some tradespeople that do that now. They work 4 10s and they just split. Yeah. And everybody loves it. I don't know.
No, agreed. It's and talking about flexibility, that could be an initial step, because I've heard about it more on the product design, where you get your time in when you get your time in. So if you want to work 4 10s, you can work 4 10s. And that kind of flexibility really empowers employees to get their job done and do a good job. Before we move on to our next story, Mark says, hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. You too, Mark. Thanks. What's your Mark? What's your side? What's the big part of Thanksgiving? There's like a lot of turkey shade going on this year, and I know that turkey's not everyone's favorite, but come on,
turkey shade.
A lot of turkey shade. People hating on turkeys.
Oh.
Just I feel like I've heard about it a lot. Like Anna. Well, yeah, but someone
Anna
was talking about
hate on turkey. She's just like, no thanks.
Yeah,
just indifference.
Do you do like tofurkey?
No. Oh,
okay. But like someone was having like a Thanksgiving chicken parmesan. I'm like, come on.
No.
Like, what are you doing? Have that any other day. All right. Our next most popular story. Manufacturer sues Norfolk Southern for derailment that closed his business. Edwin Wang is a business owner with companies near the site of the Norfolk Southern train derailment. This week, he sued the railroad for $500 million because most of his companies have remained out of business. His companies make specialized ceramic fiber insulation products for steel mills. This is according to a report in the AP. CeramSource, the wholesale part of his business, was able to reopen last month in a new location in Pennsylvania. His other businesses have stayed shuttered over contamination concerns and equipment that Wang just can't afford to replace. Before the derailment, Wang had 50 employees and plans to expand. Jeff, the more we dug into this, it seemed like the story continued to evolve. I mean, and to its credit, like the railroad is being proactive. The railroad has reached confidential settlements with 11 businesses and offered $1.8 million to 55 others. But I mean, what this guy had created in this very specific part of the nation, and then the fact that it was all of a sudden completely destroyed by this derailment, it was incredible. And you really have to feel for this guy.
It's an incredible story. I encourage people to check it out. First of all, I just have to call this guy out for his LinkedIn profile because he is very passionate. His first sentence is, "We are shutting down and leaving Eastern Pennsylvania due to the derailment." Oh, that's what he describes his job as right now, essentially. So he is very frustrated. And there's a lot of different contexts to the story. I'd really encourage, we'll put the link in the description, but on Medium, he basically profiles right from the start up until the time of the derailment and afterwards in terms of how this all affected his business. So if I can go into a little bit of detail here without telling the full story, essentially, Edwin's he's a Chinese American. He was importing these products, basically, had a huge growth for it here in the U.S., so he wanted to start manufacturing here. We talk about reshoring. This was somebody who was basically creating new jobs here in the U.S. in the most traditional way possible. And what he was able to do is find a couple of, all the stereotypical elements of rundown Rust Belt facilities. He found 2 of them in this area, East Palestine, Ohio, put what had to be millions of dollars into these two facilities to help improve, to just bring them up to the point where they could do manufacturing basically in these buildings.
To completely rehabilitate them and like just sweat equity too.
Yeah, I mean, and just everything about it, from the landscaping and like basically tore stuff down, put stuff up, excavating floors to put in presses. It's just incredible amount of work. And this town of 4,700 people, 50 jobs there, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Especially when you're bringing something in that's serving steel manufacturing, that's right in their wheelhouse. I mean, everything about this was so positive. Everything that he was able to do, COVID hits. Okay. Got to figure that out, because he started investing in these companies, or excuse me, these buildings right before then. So they dealt with COVID. They got through that. Things are humming along. This derailment happened within 25 feet of his business.
Yeah.
Where whenever you see the pictures of this derailment, the bright blue buildings, that's them.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And when they had figured out how to come back, and it was heartbreaking to see everything that happened after this derailment in terms of the saturation of these chemicals into the ground, to the point where they tried bringing employees back in, had to send them home because they were getting sick after a matter of hours, essentially.
Yeah.
Even though the EPA report said the air quality was good. So he was doing all of the right things every step of the way. This is what we want. This is a feel-good story in U.S. manufacturing. This derailment happens, and not only is Norfolk Southern dragging their feet, it feels like, in terms of remediating the area, which is not just affecting this business, by the way. It is affecting this entire geography, because they've got to dig into the ground. They've got to get all of the chemical out of there. There's still issues with the groundwater. There are still issues with this whole community in terms of people still getting sick from all the toxicity of what's in the environment. And as a result, Edwin is left with no other options but to pull out of this area and go back to New Jersey, which is basically where the company, where he had founded it initially as an importer.
Yeah.
So when you look at all of this and you look at what Norfolk Southern is offering, they offered him $45,000 at one point to basically rent his space so they could clean it up.
Oh, okay.
He basically said, use it, keep your money, get this done.
Yeah.
Is basically where he was coming from. That was February. We are now in November. His plants have been shuttered ever since this first happened.
Yeah.
So just the loss of revenue he suffered there, all these individuals have been out of work. And now, you said Norfolk Southern came in with $100 million.
Yeah.
The state is saying, try $1 billion to get this back up and running.
Yeah.
He's suing for a fair amount here too. This is I think this has the potential to turn into sort of a Deepwater Horizon type situation for Norfolk Southern. The environmental impact here is incredible, but the economic impact is going to be felt for at least as long for what they've done, not just to his businesses, but to others as well.
Well, and you're right in terms of this being the feel-good story, the manufacturing feel-good story we always want to hear.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, townspeople were coming to him and thanking him for rehabilitating this blighted eyesore, and they actually increased their home values because he had done this. And then Anna, let's remember that this all started with an overheated bearing. So just again, the importance of just maintenance on even the smallest components. And it is incredible how this really feel-good story of American reshoring just completely undone by the devastation that happened in East Palestine.
Yeah, and Jeff had shared that article with me as well, and it was a really interesting read, and you just feel so much sympathy for this individual who, I think sometimes you read these stories and it's easy to paint like a facility with like the brush of like a faceless corporation, and they have insurance, they'll get this figured out, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, it was like it's just gutting to read.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking.
He was so deliberate. He had this very well articulated plan. He specifically chose this area, the right product, the right talent, and it feels just really unfair. I do feel hopeful that he's got a decent legal case in front of him. I think often in these types of suits, it's kind of an uphill climb. But unfortunately for Norfolk Southern, they have a very public track record as it pertains to state safety that is not doing them any favors as this stuff unfolds. Fortune reported that just hours before this train derailed, a judge ruled that a former railroad employee could proceed with a lawsuit claiming that he had been harassed for years by managers who said he reported too many flaws in rail cars he inspected and had his job changed after reporting an injury. This is just one case, but what the Fortune article goes on to say is that not just Norfolk Southern, but many other large rail companies have been subject to more than 800 whistleblower complaints over safety practices. They say that the companies face widespread accusations of an industry-wide pattern of retaliation against workers who report safety violations. So keep in mind that these whistleblowers were documented before this case in East Palestine. I think the collateral damage of these is just the mere presence of this retaliation and this culture causes people to not report because they're afraid of what's going to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of not knowing what the rest of that, the hidden problem that is there. But it sounds like this is a massive problem, not just for this railway, but others. So, I hope that Mr. Wang gets his day in court. And I think it will most certainly help his case to be able to look back on some of this highly publicized stuff that is coming out a little bit more now after this case, but Norfolk Southern examples of them being dismissive, even aggressively so, on cases of safety.
Well, and I give him a lot of credit for sharing his story because after everything he has been through, it's easy to just be defeated, and just kind of take what they'll give you and walk away. But that's clearly not his style. It's also kind of a reminder that, what did you say the population was, like 5,000?
Yeah.
He is just one of many who are suffering, just as a result of this tragic outcome. So hopefully there is some movement in terms of remediating the area and trying to make some of these people and businesses whole again. Our next most popular story this week. Investigation reveals sleep deprivation, drug use amid harsh working conditions at SpaceX. A recent Reuters investigation reported that working conditions at SpaceX led to some pretty dreadful scenarios. According to sources familiar with SpaceX's manufacturing and launch facility near Brownsville, Texas, employees would work more than 80 hours per week. Some workers figured they could get more done if they just didn't leave, so they slept on site. Others turned to Adderall, a stimulant used to treat ADHD despite not having a prescription. Travis Carson, who is a former supervisor at the facility, said workers would even fall asleep in the bathrooms. When SpaceX began making rockets and tents near a Gulf of Mexico beach, the welders reportedly worked on rocket parts for up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, in temperatures higher than 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Reuters found workers' compensation claims, medical records, emergency call records, and internal injury logs that uncovered injuries across the entire company. Broken bones, crushed body parts, head injuries, even amputations. The Brownsville facility, which employs more than 1,600 workers, has become the central point of SpaceX's Mars mission. In 2022, the location reportedly had the highest injury rate compared to other company sites at 4.8 injuries or illnesses per 100 workers. And Reuters documented at least 600 injuries to SpaceX workers since 2014. Now, I understand that sometimes a lot of these reports come out and they seem anecdotal in nature because it's just, a couple of disgruntled employees, 6 people that are angry, kind of telling horror stories or war stories. But it seems like there is a ongoing negligence at SpaceX in pursuit of a mission to Mars.
It is concerning. I think that you try to contextualize this by looking at other workplaces where you see this type of behavior occurring. I know sometimes people point to an oil rig, for example, as having very harsh working conditions, very long hours. Mm-hmm. In those cases, a lot of times those or commercial fishing or something like that, they're working 12-hour days, 2 weeks in a row, and then they have 3 weeks off. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think the other is when you're in a very deadline-driven environment, and that is a circumstantial extreme. Yeah. Where we've all had to hustle to complete a project, and work extra hours or stay late or whatever. That's
every day.
Yeah. No. You're not.
No.
Are you working? If you're working 12 hours a day, David, something is wrong.
12 hours. Well, okay, maybe
at this
not 12.
job.
Oh, this job. No. I'm putting in 12s at Kohl's though. No.
It's that type of scenario is meant to be very short term. It's not meant to be every day, right? Yeah. And what concerns me in the case of SpaceX is if these allegations are true, this scenario is neither of those things. And I think it's easy to say that the workers are doing this on their own volition, but I think consider a couple of things. One, sometimes in manufacturing and other trades or other jobs as well, overtime can be posited as mandatory. First of all, especially for a non-union worker, as we know that SpaceX is a non-union facility. They don't have any kind of formal contract. They don't have safeguards to protect them from having to do that stuff. Second, even if there's not any sort of mandatory overtime, there is tremendous pressure, I think, on employees to kind of fall in line with what is considered an expectation to accommodate the employer in these circumstances, because they fear backlash, they fear retaliation, they fear being characterized as not a team player. And even if that means whatever they're doing is detrimental to their health and well-being, which we're seeing the evidence of that. Also, Elon Musk, his leadership has been very public. We don't get insight into that in most businesses like we do with him, but it's become very clear he is not the 4-day work week guy.
No. Unless you're working like 4 24s.
Yeah, like
with like another 3 after that.
Yeah.
Then he's into it.
He's not the boss that's taking a mental health day. He sets the absolute worst example, in my opinion, of work-life balance. And I think that sets the tone for his companies. And what's most alarming to me is that this is manufacturing, so the stakes are very high in terms of safety. The injuries that people can sustain from being overworked and overtired are catastrophic. They're like, life-changing injuries that could take place. Yeah. It's not an issue of, somebody making a mistake in an email. It's like, these are presses. This is terrifying. And then not to mention just the ramifications of this program, which we'll talk about more later, but SpaceX is building something that's going to ferry astronauts to the moon. And they're trying to do so quickly. And I get that they want to get this done, but we can't afford to have people at the wheel of this that are getting 4 hours of sleep every night and falling asleep in the bathroom and taking prescription drugs that they don't have a prescription for to stay awake. I mean, that is not the cost of doing business. That we cannot be doing that. That is like a terrible standard. And I think Elon Musk, he owes the SpaceX workers a better attitude on this.
I think that if we did make a cultural shift to 4-day work weeks, Musk would fight for a week to only be 4 days. Like, all right, that's fine. You want a 4-day work week? We're changing the whole calendar.
We start again on Thursday.
We can understand why he's so anti-union, like you said, because the situation would never fly with representation, Jeff. And a lot of times, working conditions like this, especially when you have like that startup mentality, is seen as like a badge of honor. It's still unhealthy, but it also is like, especially when I want to focus on startups, like it's a temporary necessity, right? To kind of like get the company up and off the ground, but like it's not sustainable.
Well, I think the big difference there is being self-motivated and being employer-driven. Okay.
Yeah.
When you're in a startup and a lot of things you're talking about there, that's because you've got a collective of individuals who have bought in. Like, this is what we're going to do. If I need to work for 3 weeks straight, I'm going to, because I see, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. This is different. These were frontline workers who were assigned a task and then said, no, you're going to work 80 hours. Okay. This is just what it is, and deal with it. Yeah. And they weren't supported appropriately. It's really interesting, whether it's these stories or some others that we've spoken about. We talk a lot about technology and innovation and improving processes and all of those things. And they can be viable solutions, but it always comes back to a very basic appreciation, consideration, or just awareness of the human element. Yeah. And that is what is missing in a lot of these stories. I mean, even the Norfolk Southern one, it's not appreciating the impact that was having on people's day-to-day lives.
Right.
This is another prime example. A couple of things that caught me here is they talk about 4.8 injuries per 100 people.
Yeah.
According to OSHA, the average is 2.3.
Mm-hmm.
Twice as many.
Yeah, more than double.
Now, you're a data guy. If anything else, I know Elon Musk must look at data.
Yeah.
Or somebody there in the operational side has to look at that and go, hey, wait a minute.
Those are inefficiencies.
That's twice as much. And quite honestly, the fact that we're working 80-hour work weeks, the fact that it's only twice as much is kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
Then again, we don't know what wasn't reported and everything
Yeah, this is
else.
only what they found.
Even when you look specifically at welding, 2.6 incidents per 100 people.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're at 4.8 here.
Yeah.
This should just be, how this is not a red flag is amazing. And again, it does go back to the tone, as Anna mentioned, it's set by the leader. And while there's a ton of different levels between Elon Musk and these individuals working on these rockets, it starts at the top and it flows downhill. So there's no way that he can avoid some level of accountability. The other thing that blows me away is Reuters writes this article. They've got all these facts from talking to people, all of this data that they can chronologize and show the results of people getting hurt. And what is SpaceX's response?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Yeah.
How do you miss a softball like talking about company safety?
Yeah.
I mean, at a minimum, they could come out and say, look, we strive to be as safe as we possibly can and do everything we can to stay in compliance. You know, that corporate speak that everybody else would spit out. And they're so above that and so like, you know what? Safety's kind of on the individual here, man. We don't want to get in anybody's way. And they don't want to wear safety glasses. That's cool.
Yeah.
No. Structure, SOPs, everybody has it for safety. The last thought, and I'm not going to like get on this too far, after all of this stuff, all these documented incidents, fractured skulls, people losing eyes, $50,000 in total fines from OSHA and Cal OSHA.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me here?
Yeah. That's not even a slap on the wrist. I mean, maybe working at SpaceX just isn't for the faint of heart. I mean, there has to be something said about, you know, we hear about people that want to work for SpaceX. It is an in-demand job for young engineers. And is it just understood that, like, hey, you want to work here, you're coming to work here, and you're going to work a lot if you're going to be here?
Okay, there's enough understood safety concerns in any job, especially in manufacturing.
Yeah.
We're dealing with rockets here.
Yeah.
Okay. We're dealing with a lot of very unique environments that present new safety challenges. To not equip your organization with the right protocols and guidelines to ensure people don't die and get hurt every day, that's not something that should be assumed is going to be on you to handle. Yeah. It should be assumed that the company is going to support those efforts. Number one, because they have to. Okay. Yeah. But number two, because again, going back to that whole recognition of the human condition, and we aren't employing robots to do this yet, you got to take care of people.
No, agreed. And Anna, Jeff raises a really good point about the numbers where, you know, when you're looking at trying to be as efficient, be the leader in the commercial space industry, when your rate of incident is like 4.8 or more than double the industry standard, if you just look at the numbers, like Jeff says, that's a lot of waste. And so if anything, you can make the financial argument for why they should have a safer operation.
If that's the argument that will get you to change,
yeah,
then make it, I guess, you know, I mean, it's, yeah.
My, one of my first takeaways was like how far away are we from actually like installing nets? Like we see workers overseas where they're forced to, or not forced, I mean, they're forced to live at the facility, and it drives them crazy to the point where these companies have to install nets because people are jumping off the roof. There has to be something said about like just taking care of employees and their mental health. And it also seems like we're moving in two extremes when it comes to work and work ethic, which actually kind of tracks nicely with the state of our fractured nation. But like, it seems like there's this group of people that say like, you know, you work it to the bone. And then there's this other side that says it's all about quality of life. And it's just odd to me that people are like, no, you work as much as you can, as hard as you can until your body quits, essentially.
And this is a whole maybe deeper conversation, but it's what depends on what motivates you. Because a lot of these individuals, they're thinking, I'm working 80 hours, I'm getting paid for 80 hours, maybe there's some overtime, whatever the case may be. That's what motivates them. If we ever would go to a 4-day work week or a 32-hour work week, some people are not going to like that because they're like, no, I don't want you to hire somebody else to work those other 3-4 days. I want to do it because I want to make more money.
Yeah.
That's what's going to drive some of those differences too. there's a balance. There's a right line. There's a right balance for everybody somewhere there.
Yeah. We got to go back to this SpaceX footage and see how many people in the control room are just grinding their teeth uncontrollably because they're just like riddled with Adderall. Just like so many jaws popping in that room. All right. Our next most popular story. SpaceX launches giant new rocket, but explosions end test flight. SpaceX, there we go. SpaceX tested its monster rocket, the Starship, last weekend. It lost the booster and the spacecraft in a pair of explosions minutes into the test flight. The rocket ship did reach space before communication was lost. According to SpaceX officials, the ship's self-destruct system blew it up over the Gulf of Mexico. The entire test lasted 8 minutes, which is twice as long as the first test in April. April's test also ended in an explosion. The test flight came to an end as the ship's 6 engines were almost done firing and put it on an around-the-world path. Starship is the biggest and most powerful rocket ever built, with the goal of ferrying people to the moon and eventually Mars. Jeff, is this the ultimate example of to make an omelet, you got to break a couple eggs?
I was wondering where you're going there. I was a little worried as to what this was the ultimate example of.
No, just to make an omelet, you got to break a couple of multi-billion-dollar eggs.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because in doing some research here, I winded up on a website that I don't think I would ever have gone to on my own fruition, but govexec.com.
Ooh,
and
for the government executive times.
Really good article. Give credit to Tom Shoup here. He wrote an article talking about how our perceptions of space exploration or development of those technologies has really shifted. In other words, when we were developing the Saturn rocket that sent people to the moon the first time, that rocket never had a catastrophic failure. It never blew up. It never failed. It always worked.
Yeah.
Now we've embraced this SpaceX dynamic where, like you said, stuff's going to blow up once in a while, but we're going to learn from it. And his point is, and it's an interesting one, saying, yeah, we were safer, and yeah, things didn't blow up, but we didn't make the same type of progress if we would have pushed the envelope more. Yeah. So we're just ragging on SpaceX and Elon Musk's leadership elements here from an operational perspective. For product development and data analysis and pushing the envelope and moving forward, these are the types of things I think you're right in terms of his approach to breaking some eggs to make the omelet. There is a lot there, okay, that can be said for the approach because, 32 rockets, but it was baby steps. Yeah. This moves us closer. What'll be interesting here is before they can move forward with the next launch, they have to understand what happened and clean everything up before the FAA will give them permission to launch another rocket. That 2025 timeline, I think that's going to be tough. Yeah. We'll see if they can still hit that.
It's interesting how that timeline for some tests or some stories seems like they've got more than enough time. And then sometimes there's a story like this where there's no way. There's no way. And there was some good.
Yeah.
They came out and they said all 33 booster engines fired as designed, which didn't happen last time. The booster also separated seamlessly from the spaceship, which is good. So not all bad. It's about looking at the bright side, right?
I mean, yes, I agree that they made a lot of progress. It's hard to see that incremental progress when you're focusing on the explosion part of it.
No. There was an explosion. There was a lot of good here. A lot of good here.
A lot of good.
Mm-hmm. No parts in anybody's front yard this time.
That's true.
Reportedly.
They have said that there was not any dangerous debris. None of that happened.
Oh, I didn't miss that one. I missed that one. Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
So that's good.
No souvenirs.
Elon Musk thinks that they're going to be back in business by Christmas. I don't know if that will be the case or not, but
wait, so another test flight by Christmas?
No, I don't think another test flight, but like the how the report has to come back before they can kind of move forward again.
Oh, okay.
So I too, though, have concerns with this timeline. 2 years out from a goal to take actual astronauts up to the moon in a vessel that sure seems to explode a lot is sort of concerning to me.
It has like a 100% explosion rate so far.
100% explosion rate.
It's not good.
Yeah.
It's not good.
So a recent report published by CNN described some of there were daunting achievements that have to take place before the Starship is ready for this. They say that the Super Heavy booster experienced a rapid unscheduled disassembly or an unintentional explosion. I thought that was a great way to put it.
Yeah, a RUD.
Shortly after the separation. So basically that mishap on its own prevented SpaceX from testing the maneuvers that will be necessary to land and also reuse the launch vehicle. And the vehicle, obviously, as you said, did not spend as much time in space as they had hoped. And it was like by a lot. It was, I think it's spent maybe like, 10% of the time that they had mapped out for it to actually be in space. And it was like an hour and a half, I think, is what they had wanted to get out of it. And
It was supposed to go around the world, yeah.
The ground also lost satellite contact with it pretty quickly, and that's what caused them to trigger the self-destruct. So we have basically no data or practice on landing this at all.
Yeah.
Because it keeps exploding.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, it doesn't get back to the Earth.
So we know the problem.
Yeah.
So we know how to explode it.
So far, we're good at going up.
We don't know how to land it. So, of course, this is all standard trial and error. But in my opinion, the pressure to maintain this timeline is a little bit scary because it's SpaceX and it's Elon Musk. And we know that they're going to push themselves harder than anyone. But if you look at what NASA's trying to do here, they are basically trying to beat China to this. They want to create a permanent lunar outpost. They want to get an early lead on that. And so you just hope that nothing gets rushed in the end to try to meet that goal, because the potential outcome of that could be much, much worse than exploding an empty rocket. So obviously there's a lot of ground to cover in the next 2 years. I agree with you that deadline might have to be pushed out. I don't see a way around that. But
yeah, this is just a necessary step towards moon manufacturing. It's like we joke, but that's really what they're gonna do. I'm curious about what it was like in that tower, and I didn't get a chance to watch the entire broadcast. It's also intriguing how they are overly optimistic, public facing, but based on what we've read on those behind closed doors meetings and some of the other reporting that we've seen come out, I feel like it's so much more iron fisted behind closed doors, where it's just like, all right, we're on camera. Everybody cheer about how this was so good. Just like, is it off? Listen, it's sorry, that was I even startled myself. Sorry if I popped the audio, guys. Hopefully you weren't wearing headphones. Everyone was wearing a headphone. But I'm curious if there's ever going to be a little bit more context as to what happens at SpaceX after something like this. Do they maintain that positive spin? Like, hey guys, look at the whiteboard. Lot of good here. I don't see that. I see it more as just like, everyone here is a failure. And unless you start working 120 hours a week, it's never going to happen. But I don't know. That's just the vibe I get from how things are run from the top down.
It's hard to fault that thought.
Yeah. It's the nicest thing you've ever said to me, Jeff. No.
I don't find you completely wrong, David.
hard
Today.
to fault that thought.
It's hard to fault that thought. I'm going to make that an ornament this year. All right. Our most popular story this week. Tesla loses vital supplier to GM. Remember a while back when we had an entire episode without anything Elon Musk related? So your final thought was just saying Elon Musk. We're just going all in this week. All right. Gigacasting is changing the automotive industry. The technology was pioneered by Tesla and gave the EV maker a substantial lead in the EV market by cutting out several components and processes with a single press of a massive 9,000-ton machine. According to Reuters, GM just bought Tooling and Equipment International, or TEI, a lesser-known company that was an important Tesla supplier. TEI is a sand casting specialist that pushed forward the design and development of Tesla's gigacasting molds and solidified the automaker's position at the head of the EV market. According to Reuters, it was TEI's technology that allowed Tesla to cast increasingly complex parts. Now, as Tesla is kind of toying with the idea of a low-cost $25,000 EV, GM could make a significant leap forward not just in gigacasting, but more efficient production. Tesla isn't exactly left in the lurch, but it will be forced to rely on its other suppliers while it tries to find a new sand casting dance partner. According to the people close to the situation, the move could force Tesla to try and bring the technology in-house to prevent future disruptions. In a statement, GM said it acquired TEI to, quote, secure access to unique casting technology. But Anna, it does seem like it really doesn't hurt that GM was snagging a key piece of Tesla's gigacasting puzzle.
It does, but I think that it would be really fun to look at the story like backstabby and really strategic, like defensive buy on behalf of GM. But I think there's a lot more to it in this case. First of all, it did come as a surprise to me because GM was pretty quiet about it.
Yeah. Remains quiet about it.
I think it took place in July, but there was not any detail released until just this week. But we were just talking about gigacasting and how Tesla, had all these challenges that it was facing, and maybe gigacasting could be a silver bullet for them to try to cut costs in this competitive race for EV buyers, and they were ahead and all this stuff. So then when this story broke like the next day, I was like, your differentiator is gone. However, Tesla's been working with TEI for since like 2015 or something?
Yeah, nearly 10 years.
So, in my opinion, they've probably learned a lot throughout that process. I don't think that it's just yanking this piece away and leaving Tesla with absolutely no tools to continue on their road to gigacasting, because they have a lot of pieces in place already. We know that.
Yeah, this is like 1/4 of the puzzle, right?
I think where the challenge lies specifically is the line in the article that said that the move could force Tesla to try and bring the technology in-house to prevent future disruptions. So I know that TEI was involved in mold prototyping for the Cybertruck. And so I think there may be some challenges there, because that is a vehicle that is not done. I know that Tesla's acting like it's done, but we know it's not done.
Yeah, and thus far, nothing has been easy with it.
No. So I do think that Tesla could maybe carry the torch with vehicles that are already well established, but with the Cyber, I don't know what happens there. I know they're still working out some kinks. But all that said, GM has also been working with TEI since 2021. They had a long-term contract. So by no means was this an exclusive supplier to Tesla. And so I think while it doesn't hurt to pull the rug out, it's not exactly as if this was just a defensive buy for GM. This was also very strategic for them from a production standpoint, because this has a ton of value for them. And, as you're pointing out, there's been massive development in auto production, and everyone in this sector wants to get their hands on gigacasting capabilities. So to me, this is more about GM pursuing that, securing its own future production security and efficiency, rather than necessarily like going out and trying to take something away from Tesla. That said, I do think if Tesla tries to bring this technology in-house, which they may, there is some risk there in terms of what they're building that's new, So I don't know exactly how that will play out. They have a lot of challenges already that they're facing as a company, Tesla. So they did not need this, right?
Yeah.
But again, I don't think that it was GM being petty and going after Tesla. I think it was GM protecting its own interests.
No, completely agree. Where, GM is like, we need to bring this technology in-house. And they're just like, oh, but, it's really going to take this opportunity away from Tesla. And it's just like, that's just the little cherry on top. That's all just like, oh, you know what? That's really unfortunate. But Jeff, this is not unheard of, right? I mean, first of all, when it comes to EVs, gigacasting and battery technology, those are the game changers thus far, right? And we see it where a manufacturer works with a partner, that relationship is very close, and then suddenly they realize they can't live without them, and it might just be cheaper to bring them into the fold.
Well, a couple things here. First of all, I don't know that gigacasting is like locked in as the way forward.
Okay.
I think it's interesting that it's gotten a lot of more prominence here because you're seeing the big guys really get involved. Ford is getting more involved. What was the other one? Hyundai.
Volvo.
Hyundai, Toyota, Volvo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody. So this makes sense. And when you see somebody like GM and Tesla, in terms of their approaches to something like this, GM, their mantra is it's gonna be easier to buy somebody, whereas Tesla probably already was working on developing this type of technology in house. Be very surprised if this really caught them off guard and they really don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
So I think this is right in their wheelhouse to continue moving forward with. Gigacasting to me is super interesting because we've talked about some of this approach before, where you sort of had these modules that was going to be an approach for automotive manufacturing going back 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And it didn't quite come together. Now it seems like they've developed the right technology to do it. But how are all the stakeholders going to be involved? What does this mean in terms of if this makes it easier to produce these vehicles more quickly? What does that have? What happens to assembly line workers? What happens to workers on the front lines? How does that change the plant floor operations? How does the UAW feel about that? With all of these cost savings, are they going to pass that along to the consumer to help justify maybe the fact that there's fewer plant floor workers? Kind of doubt it.
Jeff,
I mean,
So how is that going to
It's
come
a
together?
$25,000 EV.
But what about the subscription model? Didn't you say, Jeff, that they would make for lower cost vehicles?
I think those are two different things when you talk about embedding technology as opposed to the way that you're fabricating the frame of the car.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I think it's going to be interesting is how does the insurance companies feel about this? Because if you're looking at a vehicle being in an accident, all of a sudden you're not just swapping out
Yeah.
pieces. You're potentially just basically totaling the vehicle because it would be too expensive to fix.
Yeah.
One piece. Yeah.
So there's a lot of different things that are going to come into play there. I think it's very interesting. I think from a purely operational perspective, I get it. Okay.
Mhm.
In terms of how it improves not just production efficiency, but also vehicle performance efficiency, because they can make it lighter with all of those welds and all the hardware and everything else. But how does this play out with everybody else that's involved in the process? So I think this, to me anyway, it was more of a story sort of supporting this growing momentum for gigacasting, as opposed to maybe leaving Tesla in the lurch.
Well, I'm also interested to see how they let TEI operate, because it sounded like a lot of the innovation with the Tesla partnership came internally from TEI and then was championed by Tesla. So is GM going to kind of keep its hands off and be like, all right, you guys are good at what you do, just like bring it to the table and we'll figure out how to put it in? Or is it, hey, GM does things a certain way and you're going to have to subscribe to that?
Well, was it Kamo? You remember the robotics company? They started with
yep.
an automotive OEM. I want to say it was Volkswagen. I could be wrong there. But essentially what they did there, and what might make sense here is, okay, you're exclusive to us in automotive, but if you've got other opportunities in non-competitive markets, go for it and build your business. I mean, if we're looking at gigacasting, this could be something that could also lead into defense industry, other areas there were shipbuilding. I don't know. I don't know all the technical elements of it, but it would seem if you can perfect it for a vehicle where you're trusting people to be in it every day on a highway, it's got other applications out there too, whether it's aerospace or whatnot.
I had no idea that, Comau is owned by Stellantis.
Stellantis, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. See, the more you know. We're learning today too.
We're putting it together. That's the puzzle we put together on
Yeah.
the show.
Wow.
We're learning, and I'm salivating for onion topping. All right.
Onion topping, not the dip.
The French fried
Not
onions.
Just the onion topping.
the onion topping.
Someone go to the store and have a case of French fried onions in the studio before we
David,
are out
do
of
you
here.
need the name brand French onions, or do you buy the commodity?
I don't even think there's like a generic.
There
Like,
are.
I think it's like
they're
French's.
like store brand.
There is? Okay. No, I go French's. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Sometimes
called-
you got to splurge.
It's called French's.
That's the
think
brand
That's
name.
the brand.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Get in on that game. All right. Great ice cream topping too. The sweet and the salty.
So nasty.
Actually, but like all jokes aside, you know what it's really good on? A peanut butter sandwich. So good.
Of course it is. Of course
So-
you've tried this.
Good. Ha! Healthy habits aside, one of the long-lasting impacts of COVID-19 and the global pandemic it created has been the priority now being placed on long-term enterprise-wide planning. So, Jeff and I talked about it. We talked about Oracle NetSuite's new white paper, The Ultimate Guide to Scenario Planning, Strategies and Steps to De-Risk Your Organization. And we kind of broke it down, made it a little more digestible. Put it in your ear hole. There you go. Download it now. In case you missed it, the stories. Sometimes you got to mix up the read, Jeff.
Mission accomplished.
All right, in case you missed it, stories maybe not as popular on the websites, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Anna, why don't you start us off? You have a really interesting in case you missed it this week.
Oh, yeah. I thought this story would have performed better on the website, but it didn't. So that's fine.
So here we are.
Yeah.
She's over it.
I'm
No big
fine
deal.
about it.
Whatever.
You can tell our reactions to our in case you missed it, and you could probably guess what's on the byline as a result of it.
So the headline is California City buys and shutters asphalt factory after years of odor complaints. So the story is about a company called All American Asphalt, who set up a shop in 1993 in a vacant area of Irvine, California. So that area steadily became more populated over the years, and neighbors over time began to complain of noxious odors coming from the facility. So after some squabbling over whose job it was to police this problem, the decision was made this past April when the city of Irvine announced that it would be buying the factory site for $285 million. At the time of the proposal, city leaders said that the price was well in excess of what plots of land typically go for in Irvine, similar type plots, but it addressed efforts to improve residents' quality of life. Among its plans, according to reports, are to convert much of the land to a nature preserve while parceling off another 80 acres to sell for a housing development in order to offset its investment costs. This past week, the factory shut its doors for good. Many residents are elated. Local news source Voice of OC, who wrote this original report, said that a class action suit against the factory has also been settled, entitling thousands of residents within a 2-mile radius to a portion of a $1.25 million payout.
What was that associated with? Just like, was it like quality of life, or what was the payout for?
I don't know exactly. I'm assuming that there was
Some sort of pollution.
yeah, because I don't see how.
Yeah.
You move next to a factory and then you're mad that it smells and they pay you for that. I don't think that there must have been something more to that, but
Okay.
there was not a lot of details on that website that lawsuit that I could find. But I did select this story because we've talked about it on the podcast many times about these contentious battles going down between communities and industry over whether it's noise, traffic, odor, whatever. Sometimes it's taking place before the plants are even there. In this case, I thought it was interesting that this plant preceded the residential development by so many years. So I think there are some nuances in play here. But I did think it was quite a unique situation where the city actually took this on and decided to offer a real solution here.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe they did overpay. It's hard to know now because there's so much left undone. But it sounds like they do have a plan to recoup their money. So if this goes right, then maybe it serves as a template for other communities dealing with the same thing. Because you have to imagine that in some cases, you probably have companies that are dealing with this drama and this litigation that would just as soon pick up and move somewhere else if they could, but they can't financially justify that.
Mm-hmm.
So to have the city come in and say, we'll buy this property from you, just go away.
Yeah.
That may have been the best for both parties. I don't know. So I think what remains to be seen is that what happens now in Irvine, is there any environmental remediation that has to take place?
There has to be.
There has to be, and
Yeah.
you don't know what that bill is going to be or how extensive that is going to be. If the output here was as toxic as residents claim, there might be some nasty stuff hiding in the ground. We don't know. So either this serves as like a potential template for other cities dealing with the same, or it's going to be a cautionary tale. I don't know yet.
Well, so is production moving somewhere else, or is it just shut down? Everything's
Money
over.
run.
Yeah, I don't know. It was not clear in the article whether they were going to relocate. They didn't say that they were,
Mm-hmm.
but again, if you're a factory and you're in this location where you're constantly dealing with lawsuits and complaints and, the city and the air board and all this stuff, like, maybe you do want to just
Yeah, maybe you do just want to take the money and run.
get out of there. I don't know.
Jeff, it makes me think of when we think of just areas in Madison or other old blighted industrial areas like we saw before Edwin Wang came into East Palestine, that, one way or another, the city winds up having to deal with it. So is this the city being proactive in a way of like knowing that they're going to have to eventually deal with this site and like, hey, let's just buy it and try and monetize it into a residential area? Or is this just California being stereotypical California and another decision that the state has made that we wonder how they're going to pay for?
The city, not the state.
Or sorry, the city. Sorry, yeah.
I mean, it is a little bit stereotypical, but I don't think that's a bad thing because that's consistent.
Yeah.
And really I think what it comes down to is different priorities and different geographies. There may be some places where they would say, look, this employs X number of people. This is an important financial base for our community. We're going to have to deal with this, or we don't have a solution that just makes it go away. Like in this one. Now here, Irvine, California, maybe it doesn't employ a lot of people. Maybe people were just like, we don't care if these jobs go away. This is more of a social concern.
Yeah.
Whatever, there's no right or wrong answer here. Whatever works for you and whatever works for your community. It doesn't seem like anybody was upset that the city overpaid dramatically to shut this place down.
Yeah.
If the owners made out, which it seems like they did as well, maybe it is a win-win. I just think I don't know if it's a blueprint, but I think it's another potential solution for these types of situations, depending again on what works for you. I mean, I know that sounds kind of a cop-out, but I think it's just there's different priorities in different places.
Well, let me try to tee up another soapbox for you. So when we were discussing the factory that was noisy and people moved next to the noisy factory, they built a development next to an asphalt factory. Yeah. What were they expecting?
But you were the one who was mad at the people. We were talking because if you remember that story, that the noise came later. The noise was not ever, and so I think that that is fair if you're a resident and something happens that is ruining your quality of life, that you can take that to somebody and file a complaint.
It's not an apples to apples comparison. It was just the first one that came up. Okay, sorry. Comparison aside, Jeff, is that kind of on the people who built the development next to an asphalt factory? There has to be some.
No, I agree. Yeah. It is. But again, the consensus is, to Anna's point, this is a solution that makes everybody happy.
Yeah.
I'm not saying if it was me, if it was my plant, I'd be like, hey, you built here. This is how I feed my family. You're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened here.
Well,
everybody was happy to do it this way. So less conflict.
And
it's fine in this instance.
One thing that we left out of the story is that, 5 years before the development went in, this was actually a peanut butter factory. And then it changed to asphalt, just completely pulled the rug out. No, none of that happened. None of that happened. No, I'm saying if it was a direct comparison with the other one where all of a sudden the noise started.
Yeah, no, and
man.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's something definitely that you could say.
Well, in that instance, when you're talking about the noise, if we can just get past whatever was.
Let's burn through it.
My point there was that is on the people. I felt more sympathy for the plant there, that situation, because it was an isolated group of people. We were talking about basically a block that was really affected by the noise. Here, it was the whole community. Yeah. And if the whole community is in the same sheet of paper, go.
Completely agree. No, completely agree. Hey, sometimes hypotheticals, comparisons, they just can't all work out. They can't always be winners. As my wife loves when I say at home, hey, it can't always be a winner.
Yeah, the peanut butter plant rug thing.
The poor peanut butter plant that all of a sudden, chasing the almighty dollar turned into an asphalt factory. Just shocked the community. We lost everyone. Mark, it was good to see you. According to the producer, everyone live just left. Sorry, I did that. All right. Well, if you're still with us, mine, in case you missed it, is about a Serta Simmons new factory that was opened in Wisconsin. Serta Simmons is just really rolls off the tongue. But Serta Simmons Bedding last week held a grand opening event for its new state-of-the-art 500,000 square foot manufacturing plant in Janesville, Wisconsin. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for either coming back or just the positive reinforcement. Mark says great commentary.
It's gonna keep David going.
Yeah, that's good. I can just keep doing like silent hand gestures, which is really great for the podcast medium. This new factory is going to make mattresses and other bedding products. The company has long had a manufacturing presence in Rock County with plants in Janesville and Beloit. The new factory is going to consolidate operations from both of those plants, but retain more than 300 jobs. The company hopes to create new jobs over the next few years as it regains market share that it lost recently. If you remember earlier this year, Serta filed for and then emerged from bankruptcy. This new plant is going to bring all operations under one roof, including Serta Perfect Sleeper, the Serta Eye Comfort, the Beauty Rest Harmony, and the Beauty Rest Black lines, all under a single location. And Serta now operates 18 manufacturing plants across the U.S. and Canada. It said one of the biggest competitive differences of this new mega mattress factory is that it's just going to help streamline operations. One of the reasons I picked this story was because last week we were talking about how Janesville could have been on Mike Collins' list for communities so greatly impacted by losing manufacturing jobs. And this is something good for Janesville. You know, it is kind of taking two older factories and combining them into one new state-of-the-art facility. It's also a positive story about how companies can file for and emerge successfully from bankruptcy. So it was a feel-good story. It was a short story. And you know what? People are always going to need beds. So, well, hopefully, I don't know. Maybe we'll be sleeping vertically in pods one day. Who knows? But I don't know. That's why I chose this story, just because, you know, Janesville got a good break. And it's good to see it every once in a while. Anna, did you have a chance to check out the Serta story?
Yeah. So, but is the good break that they closed two factories and opened one?
Well, I mean, yeah, because they closed like two lesser, you know, not as productive or efficient facilities to open this larger state-of-the-art facility and retained all the jobs.
Did they retain all the jobs?
Yeah, that's why I said retained all the jobs.
Well, you said retain more than 300 jobs.
I retained the jobs.
Okay, I was just asking. I mean,
well, they're not only retaining the jobs, and they're also plan to add jobs as well.
Well, good. Obviously, they need to right the ship in order to maintain competitive, be competitive in the market. Emerging from bankruptcy, that's also especially important that they kind of make some changes. No, I was just curious if in the short term any jobs were lost as they close those two facilities and combine, because that phrasing retained more than 300 jobs is a little bit vague. So.
Yeah, that was a little of a red flag for you.
It was, because I was like, well, were there 500, but they retained more than 300? You know, it's just hard to know if it's like near-term positive or long-term positive, I guess. Or, you know, could be both, but
you're skeptical. Understandably
I don't
so.
know. That's why I asked, because I don't know.
I don't know either. Jeff, your thoughts on Serta's new...
I don't know.
Yeah. Let me look into it. Can't find anything.
No, I think the thing that stood out for me, David, is the fact that textiles is definitely an area where we've seen a lot of jobs leaving the United States. It was good to see these retained here. We're also looking at a lot of efficiencies, not just operationally, but also from just a resource perspective, energy, things like that. Also, this part of this neck of the woods, when we can put up new buildings as opposed to I know we try to revitalize some of these older spaces, but there's a lot of inherent inefficiencies that are going to come from that. Mm-hmm. So to put energy literally and figuratively into this type of project, I think was positive on a number of levels. And hopefully it also maybe sets the groundwork for additional textile-based companies to start looking at more manufacturing in the U.S. and especially the Midwest.
Agreed.
Okay, guys. The Beloit plant is sending all 120 employees to the new factory in phases. I don't know what that exactly means, but it sounds like all those jobs are still there. I don't know about the other plant, but
I'm... Don't have to sound so upset. Looks like they're keeping all the jobs.
David, you were right.
No, I'm
this
not.
Time.
No, guys, I'm just...
It says in phases, so I'm pretty sure they're going to fire some of them for a bit and then bring them back.
At a lesser wage.
Just trying to...
First, they're going to kick their dog.
No, it's good.
Talk and read at the same time, which is like...
It's impossible. There have been a couple of times I've tried to like actively Google while providing analysis, and just both things break.
It's not, yeah. So I don't know, but it's a good sign.
So, yeah, I mean, honestly... if they're going to relocate everyone from Beloit, it stands to reason that they're going to keep the jobs in the town that they decided to stay in. But hey, let me just take more blind reaches. Jeff, what's your in case you missed it this week?
Went a little different route here. I picked an article talking about scientists are turning invasive carp into double agents. Okay. Excuse me. This one always hit home because this carp invasion has definitely, I've felt the impact in my personal life.
Oh, really?
So those who aren't familiar, basically 60s and 70s, they introduced a lot of these non-native carp into lakes and streams down south to try to take care of weeds and pests and other things like that, to basically clean up the areas down there. Well, as animals do, they don't just stay in one spot. And whether it was through flooding, through some less than diligent management of these fish, they got out. Mm-hmm. And they've been making their way north steadily via the Mississippi River. Along the way, they've been eating a lot of the plant life, a lot of the other food that's there for the native species. And once it got up north here to northern Illinois and started creeping into northern Wisconsin, it's having a much bigger impact, to the point where state and federal agencies have spent over $600 million to try to stop these fish. Ooh. One of the things that they're very concerned about, again, throwing another fact at you here, is the $7 billion fishing industry that is part of the Great Lakes, in particular Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
So basically, if these fish are out there and they can eat like 40% of their body weight every day, and if you've ever seen a carp, they're not small.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is they're taking away food from all the fish we want to catch and eat. So when you start taking stuff away and hurting the population for salmon and lake trout and walleye and perch and all this other stuff that we want to catch, and they're being replaced by these big carp that nobody really knows what to do with once they get them, that's a problem. It's not just from an environmental perspective, but it's also impacting fish processing businesses. It's also impacting sportsmen in terms of going out and taking advantage of a lot of these areas that they would normally go to catch, again, panfish that they enjoy. It's more of a sporting fish, as opposed to having these carp sort of overtake this area. So we've got all of this money that's being invested into trying to eliminate this invasive species. Now, one of the things that they're doing now, which is what the article is about, is they're basically catching carp, putting a chip in there, letting them go, because carp tend to pool together in big schools.
Yeah.
Okay. So then once they find out where the trader carp is going, they can go there and catch a bunch of them at once, preferably before they breed in the spring.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the approach. But again, it's taking a ton of resources, ton of money away from things that we would probably like to spend in preserving a very important manufacturing business, but also trying to preserve sort of the other offshoots of that. When you look at all the recreational spending that could be impacted long-term, people getting out on the lakes, people wanting to go to certain geographies that might be limited now or not as interesting because the carp is wrecking their fishing. Yeah. So I think it's interesting that number one, the approach that they're taking and sort of like low jacking these carp to find where they're hiding out, as well as the sort of trickle down effect that it has on all these other industries as well. And it all came from,
they're low jacking
fish.
Yeah. It all came from 60 years ago, basically trying to get rid of weeds.
Yeah.
So
sometimes we don't understand the implications of our actions, but this is a rather simplistic potential solution, which is why I like it.
Well, and have you seen some of the issues they've had? These carp also like to jump out of the water.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to ask you if those were them. They are terrifying. Like they're creepy, and then the jumping thing is so creepy.
And they're big.
Yeah.
Like they're not
They
small
can hurt you.
fish.
And they can jump in your boats, right? Like, isn't that people like say they can get in your boat and then...
Yeah. I mean, it's legitimately the Sesame Street, fishy, where they jump into the boat. Yeah, but it only goes viral when they jump into the boat and like smoke the guy who's driving the boat.
Jeez.
Well, that was an issue because they're so overpopulated. Yeah, it still happens, obviously, because that's the way they're stimulated. But there's been just a number of different things done, from like literally hunting seasons, like people going out in the bow and shooting these things, trying to incentivize local restaurants to come up with creative recipes for cooking them, but they're carp.
Yeah.
So you're kind of limited there. Now, there are some people that like catching them. My brother loves catching them because they're big fish and they put up a big fight, but then you're just stuck with this big, smelly, dirty fish.
Smoked carp's not bad. In moderation.
Okay.
It's good. Like it's it's a seasonal thing. Have it like twice a year. I enjoy it. And then it's like, I don't need it for another 6 months.
Yeah.
No, this is a cool story. And I want I mean, so do they shock it? Basically, they find a cluster, shock it, and then kind of skim them off?
One of the weird things is because there's so many of them, they're not difficult to find. Also, carp are pretty easy to catch. I mean, they eat anything.
Yeah.
So they'll catch them,
track
them, and they lead them to the hideout.
All right. Well, before we move on to our final thoughts, because we're going on a shortened week, I figured that we'd extend the contest one extra week with adding a little bit of wrinkle, adding a wrinkle. So once again, our giveaway comes to us from our friends at Sellers. Each week, we give a winner a Sellers tumbler, a white rags box, and a shop towels box. A little bit about Sellers. They were founded in 1985. They're headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They're a leading manufacturer of shop towels, multi-use disposable wipers, towel, and tissue and absorbent products. The company's products, which are sold under the Toolbox, Clean Task, and Mayfair brands, are made from recycled and renewable materials. They're high performance and good for the environment. The company is committed to using sustainable practices in all business areas while serving people, customers, and the planet. So last week, we asked who has the messiest desk, shop, or job site. We had some people send in photos. I wanted to add a little wrinkle this week where, I understand if people don't want to cop to having the messiest desk or job site. So I wanted to put on the other side of that, if you think you have the most immaculate shop or desk or job site,
sure.
I'd like to see those as well. A little bit of the yin and yang, just because I think of it's a tale of two fathers, right? I have my dad's shop, which let's just say he'd win one aspect of this competition. And then I have my father-in-law's shop, and let's just say he would win the other aspect of the situation. I'm not calling out anybody or whatever it is, but I've seen some shops out there, and it's like, you do work in here? Real work, like with grease. Where is it? You rebuilt a car. All right, whatever. So, messiest desk, job site, or shop, cleanest desk, shop, or job site. Keep sending in those photos, and we will name a winner next week. Let's move on to our final thoughts before we get out of here. Anna, what is your final thought?
So we're approaching December, which is incidentally my favorite work month. Just because it's quieter around. I feel like we get less email. It's just easier to get some stuff done. A lot of people are out a lot. So I'm actually looking forward to doing some more writing and writing some feature stories and things like that.
Getting caught up a bit.
Getting caught up a bit. We receive a lot of pitches from companies who want us to profile their company or talk to their founder or whatever. There's just probably, what do we probably get, 50 emails a day of that?
Oh, we had 50 emails while we were recording this.
Yes,
podcast.
they're just sitting there now.
Yeah.
Very hard to keep up with that. But if anybody who is a regular listener of the podcast has a story idea for us, use the email, the podcast subject line, and tell us about it, because we will definitely read those emails. So
yeah, they go to the top of the pile.
They do.
No, that would be great if we could feature some companies of podcast readers, both on the sites and in print. That'd be cool. Well, good luck with that. I should probably do that too.
What?
Get caught up on email.
Oh.
No, I should appreciate December. Well, I thought you were going to say we're approaching the holiday because Thanksgiving is tomorrow. I just wanted to take a moment to say that I'm very thankful for you guys. I'm thankful for the podcast, and I'm thankful for producers Eric and Alex and the hard work that they put in every week to do this. I'm very thankful for everybody that listens and watches and supports the podcast. We're really growing a community of the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and I thank you for supporting us and, spreading the word. I always like it when somebody says they were sent as a referral and it's on episode 146, this episode, and then they're like, yeah, I went back and listened to them all, you guys were really figuring it out at the beginning. I also mentioned how I was going to Holland, Michigan last week to see my Grandma Jo and my Aunt Joy, and I just want to say I'm very thankful for them. And then it's just sometimes you don't realize that you're not whole, and then you get to see your Grandma Jo and your Aunt Joy, and you're whole again, and it's great. Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
Well, certainly echo those sentiments. I know Anna and I are very thankful for each other, and Eric and Alex.
Yep.
as well.
That's great, Jeff.
Yeah. Also, your contest kind of got me thinking. One of the things we might do this weekend, real exciting, is sort of clean out the basement.
Oh, okay.
So a couple of things are going to come up here. So what is your take on, at this point, baseball cards? Like, I've got a bunch of cards from when I was a kid. Does it come, like, do you start selling those things, get them away? Do you keep them?
Keep them forever.
I would say keep them forever, or go through them and at least take the ones that you still have sentiment towards. Just because, like, I have a couple that are just weird. Like, I have an Andre Rison rookie card, and it just brings me joy when I see it. I'm like, yeah. So no, and I would say you have to hold on to at least a few of them, just because they'll still bring you joy.
Okay, here's a hard one.
Okay,
children's artwork from like grade school and stuff.
Producer Eric says to digitize it. I would say
so much work.
I would say one thing that I am also thankful for is I've got a wife that is just good. Keep it gone, and just like she could take the entire pile on the table and just like throw it into the burn pit. But so I would say keep it or offer it. Well, no, they're not really like. I would keep it until they're at least in a home settled, maybe with a family, and then offer it to them. Because one thing my grandmother does is, instead of getting me gifts or anything, she just sends me relics from my past that, like, when my mom sent her like a drawing that I did when I was 7.
Oh, that's so nice.
She'll send me that in a photo, and I'm just like, that's way better than like anything else you could have gotten.
Yeah, what a cool idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, definitely take that into those consideration. Anybody has any other ideas? Good suggestions for cleaning out the basement. That's where the can koozie, I think. So let us know.
Someone's just gonna like send you a GIF of someone lighting a match. It's like,
well, that's not an option. But.
Excellent. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@in.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Jeff and Anna's are similar too, because they're so thankful for each other. Subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us live every time we record the podcast, typically on Thursdays, on a Wednesday in front of a holiday. For Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We'll see you next week. And happy Thanksgiving.